double dribble.
Good evening and welcome to the North Rose-Wolcott School District Board of Education meeting tonight. We begin tonight's meeting with the Pledge of Allegiance. Please stand. I pledge
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
a motion, please, to approve tonight's agenda. Paul and Tina. I'm going to add, if you look at your green sheets, to this, I would like a motion to add to this the superintendent's agenda, the superintendent's presentation. Is there a motion for that, please? Tina and John? Yeah. Any discussion on that? Then all in favor of approving adding the superintendent's presentation to the agenda? Motion is carried. And now back to the motion of approving the agenda. Is there any discussion on approving the agenda? Then all in favor of approving tonight's agenda? Motion is carried. We will put the superintendent's update next on the agenda. So at this time, I will turn the meeting over to the superintendent for tonight's presentation.
Thank you, Mrs. Collier. So before I begin, I just want to say, obviously, getting charged with this presentation and having everything to put together. If it's not exactly what you want at the end, there's a question and answer session from the board. Please feel free to ask as we go throughout this, because I'm trying to put this together in a linear way that makes sense, but I certainly don't have a problem with you interjecting as we go through things or even at the end. So first and foremost, you see many of our drivers here tonight, so I want to say thank you to them. What a great group of people we have in attendance, what a great part of our district they are. So I think it's important to remember for our community, they're the first to see them and the last to leave them. I know you've heard me say that before, but their importance to our district can't be overstated. So what I'm presenting tonight really is an overview, so it has nothing to do specifically with them, and anything that you attribute to a negative issue, please refer it to us from an operational standpoint, because if it wasn't for that group of people out there, situation would be much worse. So, you're going to have to click, it's not working. So, I think you started to see some of my updates earlier in the fall, basically saying, look, we're really struggling here. So I'm trying to boil tonight's presentation down to these questions that are up on the screen in front of you, which is simply stated, is there a driver shortage? What's the impact then on routing and programs? What is contributing to the issue? And then what has the district done to address this? Okay. So as we go throughout, I want to go back with some historical perspective and show with you from the first payroll in October, Gary pulled the numbers as to what our transportation staff look like with respect to drivers. So you can see the historical data. We're hovering typically around that 20 to 21 mark. I think even if you went back to 18, 19, you'd see that those numbers were pretty consistent with the 20 to 21 range. Last year in 22, 23 is really when we started to notice the deficit. And then this year, we're right down to, the bare minimum, to the point where we're about 4 full-time drivers short. And I would say to you, between the full-time drivers shortage as well as the substitute drivers taking on additional responsibilities, I would say I feel very comfortable if we were able to fill those 4 full-time roles and got an additional 4 substitute drivers out of anything that we do. So when we talk about the routing issues, I think it's important for the board and the community to understand with the 16 drivers that we have, and if you take a look at the number of routes they have right there, you'll see that the AM and PM are very, very different for high school and elementary when it comes down to all those singletons underneath. So the drivers in Todd would know this certainly much better than me, but a lot of those singletons, as you look, are out of district placements. So it's impossible for our 16 drivers to continue to operate the way they're functioning now and putting forth the effort that they're putting forth and expect that they can do more. It's just physically impossible. As I started and mentioned at the beginning, they've done everything they possibly can and then some to contribute to our needs. But out of that routing right there, the routing, however you want to pronounce it, we've had to work on piggyback agreements, we've had to work on contracting runs, we've had to work on doubling and tripling up, and unfortunately, these are just some of the tip of the iceberg. What you don't see from most of those out-of-district placements is they all tend to start right around the same time. So we may have 3 programs going to Rochester at one particular time, and the driver is really pressed for time because they make their first stop, and then they're on to the next stop, and they're on to the third, and they're doing that in succession, knowing full well that they're trying to give the students the best opportunity to complete their entire program for the day. And there are some things that I think we have to kick around when it comes to that. So the conflict has resulted in obviously an impact on our programs. It's impacted instruction, it's impacted arrival and departure times, sporting events, so on and so forth. So as I mentioned a minute ago, in some cases we've had to contract routes. We've had to entirely depend on other districts to transport our teams. We've piggybacked with certain sport teams and things of that nature. And again, we're thankful for the cooperative nature of our partner districts as well as the other outside agencies. But when you think about where we're going, you gotta go back. I wanna go back. I thought it was me. Go back to the routing sheet. And when you think about all those different things, Rochester, Fulton, Auburn, Red Creek, the Wayne Tech and Career Center, and then from Wayne Tech and Career to Monroe 1, and then you have New Visions program, you have Halpern School in Rochester, and then an additional Monroe. They're pulled in multiple directions, so the fact that they've been able to function the way they have is miraculous in my opinion. So when we talk about the factors that I think are really contributing to this, as I see it, I've narrowed it down to 3 things. There's driver fatigue, there's being overworked, there's the demands of the job, there's the driver requirements, and then there's pay. So again, this is just the way I see the issues at hand. Other people with more experience may say, look, these are the real issues, but keep going out. So when you talk about fatigue, overwork, and the demands right now, go back to 2019 and think about what we were asking our drivers to do in 2019, and then from Monday, March 16th of 2020, when the pandemic hit. This group of people never had an opportunity to decompress. They were out there traveling the district, running their routes, delivering meals, taking work out, dropping off hotspots. I could go on and on about their efforts. And they were doing that 5 days a week. When I started in July of that year, it didn't make sense to me as to why they were the only group hustling and doing the same things that they normally would do 5 days a week when other people had a little more relief in their schedule. And we implemented a 5-day meal plan rotation, and that offered up some relief to them, but it didn't account for the fatigue that they experienced or the stressors or the demands that were placed on them. So we addressed that. Then, since the onset of 23, last spring till now, the demands have increased because they're doing everything they possibly can to keep our student programs intact and keep our academics, athletics, and extracurriculars going. And I think this fall we've quite frankly hit a wall. So when it comes down to one of the things that I started to see firsthand, some of the I would say requirements for the driver also become some of the deterrents for drivers. So if you take a look at that initial qualification out there, there's a few things that resemble a typical driver's license, like apply for a permit, you have to pass a road test, you have to do a pre-service course. Everything else on that list is a requirement that is quite stringent. So the ELDT is a program that every new hire has to take, and they tell you that it's approximately 10 hours. I can say to you, having gone through that course recently, it was not a 10-hour course for me, but that's also part of my learning style. It took me a little longer. It's a computer-based program that you have to complete. It's multiple units, it's multiple chapters in each of those units, and there's a lot of redundancy between what you would do under New York State Department of Motor Vehicle law as well as what they have to do for this. So in addition to that, as a New York State educator, we already have a set of fingerprints on file, but for driving the school bus, that's no longer appropriate. So my fingerprints are out there in multiple locations, and they couldn't use what I have for my teaching certificate. I had to go and get fingerprinted again. Then Todd would have to pull a driving abstract, which is my past history for any moving violations that I may or may not have. I have to pass a DOT physical. I have to pass a physical performance, be able to move an object a certain number of feet in a certain amount of time. I have to have the drug and alcohol screening. I have to do the pre-service 3-hour course. And then when I get ready and actually pass, I have to take another 30-hour course within the first year of completion. And then I'm subjected to a ton of random drug tests and things of that nature. From a health and safety standpoint, I have no problem with those stringent requirements. From a redundancy standpoint, knowing that these people are capable and have been driving for a number of years, the 30-hour course that has to be completed, that again reiterates what they had to do for their commercial license, is something that I wonder about, because there is an extreme demand for drivers across the state and across the nation, and I wonder if they need to try and get some more alignment between a typical commercial driver's license, which I've had for almost 30 years, and the commercial driver's license to drive a school bus. I thought simply you pass the written test, you get your passenger endorsement, you get your bus endorsement, you start driving because you got this, and that's what I ran into there. Then we move into the next step. After your initial 30 hours, the 10-hour unit, and so on and so forth, you run into your yearly requirements, which again, they're not bad. We want to make sure our drivers are healthy and safe. We want to make sure that they're continue to be subjected to alcohol and drug testing, that they're continuing to look at my driver abstract, and that I'm going to be under review from a licensed 19A examiner, which we do have within the district, but they have to observe, certify my driving habits and my traits, and continue moving on. Then we go through the rest of the things that are biannual. The behind the wheel test, again, test observed mini road exam by a 19A examiner, a written test where you have to score an 80% or higher, and then you go through a physical performance test as well. So that, from my perspective, is some of the driver requirement things that both contribute to fatigue and over demand. And then the biggest issue, which I think seems to be the common theme, is what has the district done to address the discrepancies in pay, right? So I'm going to liken us back to 2021 when we talked about a universal wage increase for our service unit. You will recall that as a board, you were giving me the directive to seek out some solutions to give our service members a fair living wage. And we went back and we used some of our federal funds, and we retroactively approved a $2.50 an hour rate increase for every service unit member. That, for our bus drivers, alleviated some of the compression that started under their previous contract in 2016, where they were told, here's the rate of pay, and these are the clusters of people that will receive this, regardless of years of experience. So we didn't quite address it there, but as we move through to July, the new collective bargaining agreement that we would qualify for health care benefits under. So it used to be 7 hours, and then there was a particular formula where they added 2 rates together, and then they had to, put some other variable in there, and it was really complex, and nobody understood what amount of money they were contributing, what amount of money the district was, and they actually didn't know what number of hours they had to work to fully comply and receive health care benefits. So one of the things that we did as a district was negotiate those hours down to 5. We felt between our food service staff, our monitors, and our bus drivers who may or may not work 7 hours a day, we wanted them all to have equity in terms of access to quality health care. So for a number of our drivers, I think it's 9, they don't receive health care benefits from the district. But for the remainder of the group that does, the rate at the top, the individual policies they have, vary in range from $9,730.08 to upwards of $27,271.44 that the district contributes to. Okay, well, that's all dictated based on the plan they sign up for, and it's based on a particular percentage. And the district's contribution for those plans, again, that is just a range, but that's the dollar amount that the district contributes to on top of what the percentage is that the individual bus driver does. Another thing that really isn't seen in a paycheck, but it's something that the district strategically did, is now we pay for the fingerprints. So we're contributing to that. So a couple of the things that I think about when it comes down to what we're potentially faced with and what we need to kick around. And I don't want to go this, but you can leave it there. I want to think about a few things before we get right into the recommendations. Our drivers have not had much of a break, since 2019, 2020. They've been given additional duties since the start of the pandemic, whether it was cleaning or sanitizing their buses in between runs, whether it's, running students to and from home during the day when they're ill, just to help out when a family doesn't have transportation. They're stretched pretty thin. So when you consider years ago, for a driver to be considered a full-time driver, the average run was about 6 hours a day. You'd be hard-pressed to find any of our drivers doing that anymore. Many of our cases, their typical day now is an 8-hour day minimally, and then if they pick up any of those additional responsibilities, it could be a 10 or 11-hour day. So I think that that's something to really kick around and consider. I think, again, about the demands that are on them, from my vantage point being behind the seat, the pre-trip inspection that they have to do alone, again, it's a necessity from a health and safety standpoint, but there are probably about 50 different things you have to do, and they have to do it in about a 15-minute period of time. And that's not even before they get out the door. They're not even out of the parking space before they have to do those 50 things, and then the work really begins. So the other piece that I think about is that they're under an extreme amount of pressure. There's an extreme amount of stress going on. I will tell you with certainty, to sit there and turn on your yellow warning lights, to turn on your amber lights, to put your bus in neutral, to make sure you pay attention to everything that's coming on as far as traffic, the student crossing, and any other potential variables that are coming at them. It's pretty stressful. And I was fortunate enough to follow one of our buses today, and I would say they have it down to a science. Our seasoned skilled drivers take about 10 seconds with that. I'm sitting out there on a road yesterday practicing, and I'm sitting there, put it in neutral. You got to remember the lights. You got to remember where the button's located. You're looking at things. You're trying to open the door. And I would say if I got it done in 30 seconds, that would have been okay for me. So that's something that our drivers really face every day. You'll recall the videos that we showed to you from 104, where Lee, if it wasn't for his skill set, avoid a major tragedy, and then Charity had one 2 weeks later where, there was a landscaping truck coming right for her, and she took the bus off the road. Thankfully, those two are very skilled drivers, as the rest of them are, but their jobs are really tough. The other part that I would be remiss if I didn't say this is, we've been watching the behaviors since we've come out of the pandemic. Last year we noticed in the classrooms that behavior and that what typically used to be described as normal is no longer normal. Now, again, go back to my previous statement, they're the first to see them, the last to leave them, and oftentimes they're going down the road with all that stimuli coming at them, and they have to constantly scan, monitor bus, manage behaviors, and understand how to keep things going so that everybody's safe. I don't know how they do it, but God bless them, and I'm really truly thankful for them for doing that. But I will say to you as an administrator, we need to do a better job of supporting them, because what I'm starting to pay attention to recently is one-way communication. We may get a referral, they may deal with it in the building, but if we don't go out, close the loop, and make the FaceTime connection with our drivers to ensure, just like we would with a classroom teacher, we heard what you said, we saw what you wrote, we understand it, and this is what we're doing about it, then we've broken a part that's very valuable in terms of the communication loop. So, for me, I would say to you, based on this week, based on the lack of drivers that we experienced Tuesday where we canceled instruction, where we had to do some things, I have a few recommendations, and I really look forward to the commentary afterward with the board for you to ask questions about. I would suggest that we do not start a conversation about contracts with an arbitrary number. I know there are a number of people out there who think your starting salary is too low. We do not have a single bus driver that is below $23.50 an hour. So an arbitrary number like $25 an hour, which many school districts around us have gone to, does not benefit that group of people. Okay, and that's the first group we need to think about. We need to think about them by opening up a dialogue with their bargaining unit and potentially having a negotiation to right-size some things. And as I thought about this last night, you think about 2020, 2016, we're heading into 23, 24. It's about time to readjust. And I would say to you, don't pick an arbitrary number, or in my mind, I wouldn't pick an arbitrary number, because Pelmac, I believe, was the first district to go to 25. When they fired that shot across the bow, slowly everyone else crept up and started doing that. Well, Pelmac recently went to $28.30 an hour for starting pay. So for us, if we were to say 17's your start with no experience, that's an $8 an hour raise. And if we're going to offer an $8 an hour raise to somebody who has no experience, no ties to the district or anything of that nature, we have to factor that in with them. But I think we need to come up with a number that A, is sustainable, and B, is something that we can support ongoing and continue to take care of our own. The third piece would be to negotiate a raise in pay for substitute drivers. I think that's something we need to consider, because most of our substitute bus drivers are not taking healthcare benefits from us. So what they don't take from us from an insurance perspective, I think we can, have a conversation on about giving them a more appealing wage to try and get some of those athletic runs covered, to get some of those after-school programs covered, and entice people who are newly retired to come back into the fold. The other part with that is, if I get a retired substitute driver or a person who retired from another district rather that was full-time there, I can actually entice them to come back and consider driving for us now because we removed that language that restricted it to a starting rate of pay. And we removed the language that says I can't go higher than 5 years of experience in that particular area because, again, that really confined us and didn't let us negotiate like most job interviews tend to be. I think we need to implement a Grow Your Own program, which is something where I believe whether it's a monitor who rides the bus, knows the routines, knows the routes, knows the students, knows the families, knows the behavior, decides to come in, get permitted, and then licensed, and then takes on some of those responsibilities if and when necessary. We may have teachers that are willing to do it. We may have support staff that are willing to do it. We may have administrators that are willing to do it. But I think we need to think about a Grow Your Own incentive to help these great people out. I think that we need to think about a paid referral program and a signing bonus. I think when you talk about attracting people, I believe that there is a way to go out and suggest these things. And I believe that there's a way to compensate both the person making the reference and the person receiving the referral. I believe that that's something to think about. I believe there are some other areas that we can consider. I also want to state, until we address that compression issue, I don't believe any of these other things were going to be a viable option because I think we were all over the place trying to correct and give people years of service and credit for those years of service. Now that we've negotiated that out and we have ourselves in a position, I believe we should start as soon as possible with their bargaining unit and try to get them back to the table and take care of many of these things and hope that other people that we haven't seen before walk through the door and sign up for a position and potentially fill the role as a substitute driver. I know I constantly am out and offering positions up, and I have no problem doing that or saying that, but right now I haven't had any luck securing those people. So, questions, comments, and again, those are just some general thoughts based on 3 areas that I think are factors contributing to our issues. The student behavior, the communication, the driver demands, the burnout, all those things, the rate of pay, and then again, just the driver requirements. Those drivers, they do a lot for us daily, and it's much appreciated.
Board members, do you have any questions or need for clarification on Mr. Coleman's presentation?
Thank you for putting that together. How many drivers do we have as of today?
16.
Does that include the one resignation for tonight?
Which is the one that's in there the next meeting?
Yes.
Well, by the time they're done, we'll have our new mechanic who will be driving Mondays till we 16.
A lot of what I heard tonight is about the attraction of new bus drivers to the district. What have we implemented to retain the staff members? Because I know that pay ultimately and starting pay isn't the focus, but from what I've gathered over the last few months worth of
Pay. There isn't a formula used anymore. In the past, I believe they used to make $10 for washing the bus. So that's something that's there. Keep going back to the next screen. This language here, again, this is for new drivers. Keep going. This here is for the drivers that currently sit there. Does it benefit them right now? No, but it definitely will benefit them and set them up for positional success. And again, to my point earlier, I'm only highlighting specific things. Keep going. This insurance piece, that's a pretty substantial contribution from the district. And then the fingerprinting, that's exclusive to new people as well. And then number one, which don't consider an arbitrary number, but number two, negotiate a pay raise for our drivers. So I'm not sure what part I missed.
Well, no, part is that we're losing seasoned drivers today. So I'm just trying to figure out what we're going to do to attract.
Well, I gotta get some back to the table. It's a collective bargaining issue, so I gotta get, one of the things I think the board has to do is decide, are you gonna give me permission to open up negotiations with the service unit? That's to answer your question, because I can't just arbitrarily pick. The board has to say, you have the authority to go ahead and start the conversation, which I'm prepared to do. And I can't get into specifics because I don't have them. I mean, if I did, and then all of a sudden it doesn't come to fruition, I could be hit, and the board could be hit with regressive bargaining. But I have some ideas. I just need the board to say go forward.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Tina?
Out of curiosity, how that increased the price, their starting salary by $3 more to 25 didn't work?
Did not. I mean, so think about it. So it's like with a Regents exam or any other thing. If today it's 25, what's to say next year it's not 26? What's to say the following year it's not 27? So again, the shortage is not just here. We're feeling the direct stress. So the conversation has to be contained to our four walls. I get that. I can't contribute or factor in what is best for someone else's family, and I'll never deter someone from pursuing that. So Calmac was the first one in the county to go to 25, and it was just a few short years ago, and now they're at 28.35. I don't know what their budget is for drivers. I haven't done that much extensive work today. I just didn't have the time, but I will say to you, the arbitrary number doesn't work. And if we go back to the scale, our drivers, right, our seasoned drivers, the average, the lowest person in our district currently makes $23.50 an hour. The highest is $28.50 an hour. If you're telling me exclusively go out with an $8 increase just for our drivers, that for the group that we have right there, that's $152,000 approximately just for that group. And keep in mind, you have many members of the service unit that would pay close attention to that. And there'd be a very difficult thing to approve if it was just for that particular part of that unit. The other piece that you have to keep in mind, and I certainly understand and appreciate Mr. Sloan's point, is that you also have a contract expiring with another bargaining unit at the end of this year. And you have to think about how we've been working through negotiations with the different bargaining units with the parameters that the board gave me previously in terms of whatever we implement being sustainable. Whatever we implement, we want to keep the lowest possible tax rate increase to our community. Now, if you're giving me different parameters, I will do whatever I can with those parameters, but I need the board to give me a conversation starter with the service unit so that I can actually get a seat at the table. Because as much as I want to say they're deserving, and they are, I still have to factor in the rest of the service unit when we go to the table. Any other questions?
Yeah, I know nobody else is going to ask. So, surrounding districts, do they have disruption, are they having disruption in the education of their students because of driver shortages like we are right now?
I have no idea. I know a couple years ago that there were a there was a district that went almost fully asynchronous for about a month. And then there were several times where they interrupted, but I haven't really paid attention to what other districts are doing with respect to opening or closing.
That everything that we're talking about when it comes to pay and benefits will help in the future, but my concern is right now with the students that don't have access to what we have set forth in the equity of our buildings. And I just need to know, or I'd like some sort of idea as to how we're going to address that so that those students don't fall behind.
Well, so to summarize, you're giving me two different points. The first,
No, all the points directed to the student. So no matter what I'm saying, the end result is, unless we get students here, we don't have, we really know what to do.
fantastic, that's great, I appreciate that. But the two things that you said were take care of the current drivers, because everything you saw on the screen was what are we doing to attract new, and then you're telling me solicit new so that we can achieve the goal that we're all here for, which is give our students the best opportunity and program possible.
And I think you have to talk about both of those, because had we, I'm not placing blame, so don't take this personally, but had we retained those 5 staff members that had left to go to other districts for more money, we might not be in the bind that we are right now. So I think you have to have both discussions. We need to talk about the people that have been here a long time helping us out, but we also need to figure out a way to retain the ones that we have coming in
Sure.
at some point in time to correct the problem. So it's not an either or, I think it's both.
Melanie, go back to the language. This is, again, I don't take it personally, because you guys can choose whatever right there, choose whatever prerogative you want. I'll do whatever I can to take care of the people who take care of us daily. You can't negotiate with people outside of those parameters. You just can't. That piece of language, you just approved us creating an MOA with their bargaining unit in September. So I haven't even had a chance to utilize the fact that that language is no longer in the contract to attract new people. So one of the drivers that left us had 2 years of experience. So for me to negotiate with a singleton is not possible. You have to bargain within the confines of their contract. That confine rate there is restrictive. That negotiation with that one particular individual who was here for a little over a year, who had a year of experience from another neighboring district, I couldn't see paying that person more than somebody sitting out in the audience who's had 20 years of experience, 10 years of experience, or 15 years. And that's all I was trying to say to you. It is both. It's a two-pronged approach. You have to attract new people, and you have to take care of our own. And some of the language that we did that was to reward people as they get seasoned into their career and they think about leaving us. But I do agree, if you go to the considerations and the board's prerogative is, yes, move forward with a conversation, then I can get back to the table with their bargaining unit and think about the issues at hand, which are attracting new, retaining current, and thinking positively about how we go forward. And the Grow Your Own is open for anybody. The referral is open for anybody. But we'll start with the service unit because that's really where we need to go. Yes, sir.
Paul?
So what I think I heard you say is you need a motion, or you need from us a motion for you to open negotiations with the service.
Yes, and if it's not tonight, I would impress upon you the urgency would be the November 9th meeting at the latest, because I believe we need to get to the table soon, and we need to have some conversations, because what their unit has to do is take it back to their entire body of membership. It's not just the bus drivers, they're not their own separate entity, it's the entire service group. That's really one of the challenges, but I would say to you, with the issues at hand that he has stated, there are several things that we're missing out on, and there are things that we have benefited from a piggyback on. But those piggyback agreements have been in existence for a number of years. We're just utilizing it much more than we'd like because they can't work more than a certain number of days. And believe me, I think several of them have tried just to commit to the kids.
All right. Are there any other questions?
If it's maybe just a wonder, I mean, you know, we're talking a lot about pay and money, which is obviously very meaningful.
Continuing that loop and communicating with the parents about their concerns as well. Those things are definitely factors. I would say to you again, the demands and the stress because they're doing everything they possibly can. And some of them, I would say, we have programs of one where students require a licensed driver and they take them out for several hours, and when they come back, they may or may not be able to help what's happening in district at any particular time. The discipline, the communication, I think the fact that, you know, we're having this conversation is actually a very good thing. I think it shows that the drivers and the transportation department as a whole that we understand we have a real concern. And again, they would be best to speak to some of those issues as well.
All right. John?
I think to be proactive and upon your recommendation, I would be one that would be suggesting that we do open negotiations with the service employees.
All right. Do you want to put that into a form of a motion, John?
Sure, I think Paul and I would agree with that. We make a motion that we open negotiations with the service employees. We authorize the superintendent to do that.
Second. Paul? Is there any discussion on that motion? All in favor?
I had some discussion.
You have discussion? All right. On the motion?
On the motion, just at some point in time, can we include in that maybe feedback from the current bus drivers as to concerns or anything? I would like to be apprised of that, how they feel and how they see our transportation department growing or moving forward in years to come.
Well, that would be separate from the motion.
I would think that would be part of the negotiations, but.
It may be part of negotiations, but it's not part of the motion. The motion is to open negotiations.
Like, the motion was to drive the superintendent task, and I think that included in that task could be hearing from our current drivers.
You want to amend?
With us?
No, I think he is part of the negotiations. Do you want us to amend the?
I'd like to see an amendment that includes some sort of verbiage so that we can hear the perspective of our current drivers.
So the team, the negotiations team.
Yeah, and then they can just report back to us. I'm not saying that they need to present their feelings to us, but I would like the negotiations to represent the perspective of our current drivers back to the board, and maybe ideas that they have as well.
That's up to the superintendent to do the negotiating.
Okay.
Not us.
I'm not negotiating with Sunday, I'm just asking for their perspective to be included in the task that we're dealing
We
with.
cannot get involved in the negotiations, and that would be part of the negotiations. There are specific rules to negotiating. A board member doesn't even sit at the table with negotiations.
But I think that what I feel like what he's asking, he would like information from our drivers.
And
And I understand it's not a part of negotiations, and I understand that. So how can we ask that we receive that information?
there's a motion on the floor. We need to deal with the motion, not.
I make a motion to pull the motion from the floor until we have discussion regarding.
Well, I think to do that at the end of the meeting, that's what I was going to suggest, is move forward with the motion and then have a board discussion at the end. I see a bunch of people who are just dying to take take me out for a drive and let me behind the wheel of their bus out there, we can talk and get their feedback while they give me feedback.
Just for explanation purposes, I'd like to make sure that we're all in agreement on what we're expecting, because had this conversation taken place 7 months ago, and had we done this 7 months ago, we may not be in the position that we're in now.
Well, that's why I would go back and say, as part of my presentation, I would refute that statement and say the biggest issue I had last year was compression and getting them separation, because in 2016, they were told, this is the rate, here's the cluster, and deal with it.
I'm not criticizing you.
I'm not saying,
There is a motion on the floor, and I need to have us deal with the motion. The discussion is beyond that. There's a motion on the floor. Is there any more discussion on the actual motion? And John, repeat your motion, please.
I wish I'd written it down.
Melanie, did you write it down?
Just open negotiations with the service unit.
To open negotiations with the service unit. Is there any more discussion on opening, on that motion of opening negotiations with the service unit? Then all in favor of opening negotiations with the service unit? Opposed? Motion is carried. As far as what the board would like the negotiating team to be part of or to bring back,
Can I put forward the motion?
yes, you may put forth the motion.
I'd like to look for a second on a motion to direct the superintendent to provide survey data or the perspective data from our current bus drivers as to how, if they had the choice to fix the problem, how they would do it. And if they were in charge of fixing the problem, what they would do. Or something to that nature, because I think it's important to hear from the people who have spent a long time in this district transporting our most valuable assets. And I just want to make sure that that data is provided to the board.
Is there a second to that motion?
Can we put it in more concise terms?
I would love to have a discussion to put it into concise terms.
So what is your motion?
How would you like to change it? What's your recommendation? Because I'm shooting from the hip.
Jason, you have a motion on the floor. We're trying to clarify what your motion is.
My motion is to gather data from the bus drivers.
Who, us?
No. I said direct the superintendent to
Go ahead.
gather information.
You don't think you would do that? Apparently not.
I guess I don't understand. I don't understand your.
Would be private. Within the team, we would not want that as a discussion item in a public meeting.
I understand that, yes. But in those negotiations, that would be.
What goes on in negotiations does not come to the board until it is finalized and presented to the board by the superintendent.
So then I guess what we can change my motion to is, can we direct the superintendent to include in his recommendation to the board his findings from the current bus driver and transportation department as far as their recommendations, what they would like to see, how they would fix the problem.
Paul, you seconded the first motion. Do you agree to change that motion?
Would the changes to direct?
Direct the superintendent to include in his recommendation to the board after negotiations occur, to be part of that recommendation, to be part of the information that he provides to us, for us to make our decisions, the input from the current bus driver.
Is that getting, so now I'm asking you a question, okay? Basically, you said with your experiences, is that getting too far involved in negotiations?
Well, I would say so. I would say that what goes on in negotiations is done in negotiations, and it does not come out to the public or us until it is decided on. I would say that I think it's a real, I don't believe it shows faith in the superintendent to negotiate fairly with our drivers or the unit. And I just don't think it's, personally, I don't think it's a necessary motion, but there is a
I'll
motion.
withdraw my motion. I can see what's before. I'll withdraw my motion.
Paul, do you agree? All right. At this time, the presentation is over, and we will move to public access. Mel, are there people who have asked to speak at public access? Yes. While Mel is preparing that, I need to read this to people who are wishing to speak. Public participation is a time that the board has set aside to hear from residents of the district to express viewpoints related to the district. Policy 1510, regular board meeting, rules and public participation, establishes the rules for this public access. And if you have signed up to speak, it is expected that you have read the policy and are committed to adhere to the policy rules. Speakers are each allowed 3 minutes, and in particular, I remind you that the board does not hear complaints against any persons connected to the school system in public session, nor are any forms of prejudice, obscene language, libelous statements, or threats of violence tolerated. Additionally, board members are not allowed to respond in any way. The maximum time set aside for public access total is 30 minutes. With that said, we have 3 people who have signed up for speaking to the board. Bridget Henry.
Where do you want me?
I think the microphone is right down here.
So good evening, my name is Bridget Henry. I am a special needs bus driver for the North Rose-Wolcott District. However, because of our driver shortage, I have been in district for basically the last 2 weeks. I've done my run once. As you are aware, the transportation department is in crisis. We are tired, we are exhausted, we are stressed, we are emotional. We are losing drivers at an unprecedented rate. A week before school started, when we received our seniority list in the mail, there were 19 drivers to pick routes. We have lost 6 drivers since then, and as of an incident yesterday, probably 7. That gives us 13 drivers in our district. Now, that is not counting a mechanic because we don't have one. I don't feel a mechanic should be a full-time driver. We have buses that are 20,000 miles over oil changes, brake pulls, buses are failing inspections, so on. We are all, the remaining bus drivers, we are all doing what we can to support each other. There are days that we feel a little unappreciated. There are days that parents are hard to deal with. Students are hard to deal with. We
have a supervisor right now that I think is putting forth quite a bit of effort. He is driving every morning, he's driving every afternoon. It's hard for him to do his job, because he has a lot more to do than drive, because he is driving. I do believe that the pay, the starting pay, is a huge factor in our district. I appreciate that you're addressing existing drivers, but I do feel that the starting pay is a huge factor. Not just the pay is a concern of mine. Some of us also, we walk into a transportation building that's falling apart. We have a garage door we haven't been able to use. We have mice, and some of us drivers, we have to set mouse traps. We have a ceiling in our break room we haven't had for 6 months. We have lights in our parking lot that are not sufficient. We don't have an awning over our gas pumps when it's pouring rain or snowing or windy. We have no lights there, so when we come back from the sports trip,
Your time has expired.
I'm sure it has. Thank you for listening.
Thank you.
Extend public comment.
Yes. Good evening. My name is Linda Daisky. I am new to this district, and I was recently hired. I did interview with Red Creek, North Rose, and Sodas. I chose to take North Rose because the opportunity to have a full-time run, and I really wanted to work for Red Creek because I felt they needed the help more, but their pay was so low, I just couldn't make it happen. I mean, we have bills to pay too. I love the children. I get very close to making sure they're happy if they're sad. But Bridget's right. I've never seen a department so understaffed ever. We all do everything. We're mechanics. We're taking care of maintaining our own buses. Right now we're out of gas. We're out of unleaded gas. So we haven't had a mechanic. And those responsibilities fall on the mechanic. So Todd Henry is doing everything he can, but he's new himself. So he's being a mechanic, he's being a driver, he's being our boss. Everything he can do. And all these people that I'm working with are so loyal to their job and their children. It breaks my heart to watch how we don't feel we're being supported. I don't know what else. I get you have to think about everybody else, but the bottom line is I've talked to many drivers to bring them over here. No one's going to come here for the pay you're giving them to start. They're just not. I've tried to bring friends here. They're not going to do it. I mean, people have to make money. And people that are doing this job do care about the kids. They probably care more than they should because they try to put them before themselves. So when I tell you personally, I'm driving 9 to 10 hours a day because I'm doing the WTCC run. I'm on 104 all day long. And I go into Fairport once a day. You guys have to please figure something out. Our buses are not taking, we have 3 brand new buses sitting in our lot who can't even drive because they're not ready to drive. I don't know who's going to step and do all this work. It's work that's not being done. I guess that's all I have to say. Please work on some way to get us some help. We need help. Thank you.
Thank you, Linda. And Debbie Joplin? McIntyre. Yes, I didn't see the other one. Sorry.
Oh. My kids were in this district. I went to school in this district. And please don't have.
Debbie, is your mic on? Your little green light should be on. Okay. Is that better? Oh, wonderful. Thank you.
Yeah.
I love watching the sports. And when we had, because we don't have the bus drivers to bill, I drive over 7 hours a day. I go to Newark, I do my regular routes here in the district, and I go to Newark, and then I try to take the sports friends. Some days I don't get home till 9:30, 10 o'clock, get up at 4:30 in the morning, and start the day over again. But when we can't get canceled, oh, they're just modifying, nothing work canceled. To me, it's not like, they have work to play just as well as everyone else. That's my one issue. The pay, when we have difficult on buses, so many times, it's over and over and over again. I tell new bus drivers, they shouldn't get paper trail. Because even though we're not doing you need a paper trail. We need, in the olden days, I know this is not the olden days, kids, after they got on a bus, we're trying to keep some buses have 60 kids on a bus, elementary age. They're trying to get all those kids home safe. If you get a couple of kids every single day distracting that bus driver, it's a liability to all those children on the bus get home safe. We need to get stronger discipline for these kids. When kids were suspended years ago, they must suspended. It didn't mean a band goes out, so you make them on a bus. Go pick up kids, bring them to school. Because the kids laugh at that. Makes them feel special. They can tell all their friends. We need to do something more with the discipline. And I understand parents call it in. Parents need to, look at the tapes. See that, yes, your child is acting like this. Us bus drivers aren't making it up.
Excuse me, Debbie, your time's up. Thank you. At this time, a motion please to approve the consent agenda. Paul? John? A second. Any discussion on the consent agenda? Hearing none, all in favor of approving the consent agenda? Motion is carried. We move to board member requests and comments. I was asked for Linda Egner to tell the board that the Fork County Legislative Committee that she represents us on is sending out a survey on legislative items. And she asked me if I would send that on to you, and if you so desire, you can fill that out and send it back to her, forward it back to her. She will take it to the legislative committee to put into what they're going to be discussing for this year's legislative action from Fork County. Is there anyone else who has anything for discussion?
Is it going to be in the paper, or is it going to be an email?
It's an email.
Okay, thank you.
Anyone? They're sending that to me and then I'll send it on. Anyone else? All right. At this time, I'd like to go into executive session to discuss a personnel matter. A motion, please. Shelley and John. Any discussions? All in favor? Motion is carried. We will be going into executive session, everyone. And when we come back out of executive session, we will be adjourning. We will not conduct executive session. So welcome to wait lunch, but